Hello YouTubers, Alaska Prepper here. Ladies and gentlemen, let me tell you to start off that you better be stocking up. We are going to have a food shortage. Alright, and let me go ahead and tell you a quick story that will lead up to what we're going to talk about today. When I was in Afghanistan, we used to have a battalion commander, right? Just all units have a battalion commander, right? The chief head honcho that controls all of the companies within that battalion. And one day we were out on patrol, and the battalion commander can see what's going on in the battlefield, right, with satellite, right, because they're privy to that. Or sometimes they even got on a helicopter and they went around the battlefield to see what's going on. Well, one day we were on patrol and one of our Humvees blew an engine, and we were stuck out there in the middle of nowhere. Now, we got a call from the battalion commander saying, "What in the world is going on? Why are you sitting there for so long? You cannot be sitting there for so long." Now, obviously, he didn't get the message that we had a blown engine and that we were hooking up our Humvee to the broken Humvee so that we can pull it. Right? We're hooking it up to another Humvee. He didn't know that, but he's asking why. And the reason I'm bringing this up is that when you're sitting in a position that's far away from where things are actually taking place, you cannot really see what's going on, meaning that you're kind of out of touch with the reality of what is going on, and all you're looking at is either a screen or, in this case, a stack of papers and statistics and reports, but you're really not on the ground seeing what's going on. You're kind of like a collegiate, right? You're one of those people that maybe teaches about business but has never ever owned a business. So you may know the theory behind what is happening and what should happen, but you don't really know why it's happening. You don't really know it. You've just read it somewhere. And here, the White House's chief economist told reporters at a daily press briefing on Monday that American farmers will respond to price signals by increasing crop production, right, to mitigate food shortages. Now, ladies and gentlemen, what if the farmers can't afford to plant because their input cost is so high that when they do the calculations, they, meaning the farmers, the people that are actually on the ground doing the work, when they do the calculations and say, well, it's going to cost me $1,000 per acre to plant, but I'm only going to make $800 per acre. Now, I just made those numbers up, but you get the gist of what I'm talking about. If it's going to cost the farmer more to plant than what the farmer is going to be able to make from selling that crop, do you really think that the farmer is so good-hearted that he or she is going to go ahead and take a loss for the team? Absolutely not, ladies and gentlemen. I've said this before, that the farmer that farms potatoes, for example, in Ohio or wherever it is, Idaho, I think it's Idaho potatoes, that's the big state, but the farmer that farms those big, nice potatoes, right, that are shipped to fancy restaurants in New York or Chicago or LA or wherever it is, do you really think that they do it at a loss because they love what they are doing, because it's ingrained in their blood? It may be ingrained in their blood because they may be several generations up from where their forefathers, their grandparents, great-grandparents started farming that land. But if they can't do it for a profit, they're not going to do it. And here is a great example of a centralized system that looks at things just at the bird eye view, just from the top down, saying, well, if prices go up, then they can charge more for their food. Well, there's a little more than that involved in it, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, they're not going to plant at a loss. They're not going to take a loss. If they can't make a profit, they're not going to do it. Then what? Then the price of that item, be it potatoes, be it rice, be it whatever it is, fill in the blank, is going to go up extensively. All right? It's going to go up a lot. And then maybe the next season, they'll go ahead and plant that because they know they'll be able to realize a gain from that harvest. But if they can't see that they are going to realize a profit at the end of the harvest season, they're not going to plant it. And she continues to say here, ladies and gentlemen, they will be responding by making additional plantings and trying to take advantage of increase in pricing. The market will work as the market will work. But then my question is this: with all of the higher input costs that farmers have today compared to just a year and a half ago, how are they going to make a profit? How are they going to get through that season? Well, some people may say, well, the government will subsidize. Well, what is that going to do to help you and me? If the government does subsidize the farmers so that they can plant and not plant at a loss this year. Well, how that's going to affect you and me, ladies and gentlemen, is that there's going to be more money out in the economy, making things even more expensive. Right? The government already subsidizes food, and look at the price of food now. If they continue to subsidize it even more than what they are doing so in order to solve a problem that they created, they're just going to make that problem even worse. My point is this, is that farmers are going to have to pay a lot more to plant. They'll be lucky to make a break-even harvest, and food prices will continue to go up. There's nothing that they can do about it. They have ruined the system. And the scary part is this, ladies and gentlemen. When farmers continue to go out of business en masse, because nowadays we have, I don't know, maybe 1/4, if that, the amount of farms that we did 10 or 20 years ago, and 10 years from now, it'll probably be a lot less. All of these farms that we have, all of these individual or family farms that we have are being sucked up by big corporate farms. Eventually, they will form a monopoly on the food that everyone relies on in order to get sustenance. And we come back to this chart, ladies and gentlemen. I've shown it before. It shows the amount of grain output or grain production for the top, 5 or 6 nations in the world. And it shows that the U.S. is at second place, right behind Russia and Ukraine. However, we can pretty much take Russia out of it. And whatever Ukraine normally exports is going to be a lot less than it was before because of what's going on over there between them and Russia. And what I say is this about the 94 tons in the U.S. How are we going to produce the same amount we did last year if we don't have the fertilizer to produce it? All right, ladies and gentlemen, that's another thing that people are not looking at. Fertilizer costs have skyrocketed, and that is part of the input costs for farmers to be able to plant the grain that we all rely on. So what's going to happen? And then what's going to happen to all of these other countries that rely on our exports, that rely on Russia's exports? We have Egypt, Indonesia, Bangladesh, Pakistan, Turkey, Morocco, Tunisia, Yemen, Lebanon, and Philippines. They all rely heavily on grains that come out of the countries of Ukraine and Russia. Well, they're going to try to get their grains elsewhere. Where will that be? Will we here in the United States start to export our grains over to them? And then what's that going to do to our supply? What's that going to do to our prices? That's why I say there is a shortage of huge magnitude coming, and we have to prepare now. Because trust me when I say this, when the U.S. government has a decision to make whether to block exports to take care of their own citizens here inside our country, or whether to let these big corporations that lobby politicians so that they can make money to export those grains instead to other countries that are able and willing to pay them more for those grains than we are, what do you think they're going to do? Do you think they're going to sell the grain here at a loss or sell the grain elsewhere to make a larger profit? I think we can all answer that question honestly, and it would be that they will forsake the American people in order to sell their grains at a profit. Just look up the Irish potato famine. I have a couple of other things to show you, ladies and gentlemen, but let me finish this up with reading the very last paragraph here. As we've previously noted, the media isn't warning you that the U.S. is careening towards a food crisis, and it is. You may not see it on the shelves right now, ladies and gentlemen, but you will. Actually, you're already starting to see it on the shelves in the form of prices. The higher the prices, ladies and gentlemen, means the lower the supply. All right, the higher the demand, lower the supply. If the supply was intact with prices, then the prices would be low. If we had high supply, then we would have lower prices. But since we have lower supply, then we have higher prices. Since we have higher input costs to the farmers, all right, the producers, the people that transport it, the machinery that's needed. If we have higher input costs, the higher the price is going to be to you. Maybe the White House should focus its effort on securing domestic supplies first before exporting farm goods abroad. Now, ladies and gentlemen, what has China been doing for the last couple of years? Well, they've already done. They've accumulated more than half of the world's grain in the period of a year to a year and a half. Enough grain to feed their people for 1.5, I would say even closer to 2 years if they stopped importing right now. And what are we doing? We are exporting. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we are going to continue to export because the name of the game for these large corporations is not patriotism, it is profit. They both start with a P, but they mean two totally different things. I want to share this chart with you right here because this shows the total expenditures for farmers, right? Their input costs. And this is, a couple years old from 2020, but this is 2020's, all right, numbers. The numbers today are a lot higher than these. So I want to just go over with you a couple of these, all right? A couple of the main ones. And the first one, of course, fertilizers. It says that fertilizers and seeds account for about 17.5% of what a farm would use to plant. And that's 17.5% of their input costs, right? So let's take a look at what fertilizers are looking like. And from this article here on Marketplace, this farmer says, she says, I have double and triple fertilizer costs or fuel costs. Then you got to just grow the crop, she said with a chuckle. So she's pretty much saying, how do you expect me to grow this crop when my fertilizer and fuel costs have tripled? And ladies and gentlemen, it's worse than that right now. There are some fertilizer prices that have gone up 5x, 10x. If you were a farmer, ask yourself the same question. Would you be willing to plant at a loss? And she also says, whether you look at seeds, chemical, farm machinery, just 4 firms control 40% of the global market for all of those. Now, ladies and gentlemen, the scary part about this is not that it's 40% of the global market. Yes, that is a scary part, that just 4 firms control 40%. But the scary part is that more than likely, these firms are not even within our borders. It brings me back to the farmer, I forgot where he was from, I think Nebraska, that was waiting on a $40 part in order to run his $250,000 machinery. His machinery, his $250,000 machinery, was sitting idle because he was waiting on a $40 part that he could not get a hold of. Farm operators have begun using these strategies to cope with the growing labor demand. Now, let's just go over a few of these, the ones that I find the most disturbing. The one here that I find the most disturbing, ladies and gentlemen, is take a look at this. Moving operations abroad. It has become so expensive in the United States to farm that farmers are now considering moving their operations abroad. How did that work out for our manufacturing? Now imagine if our farmers start picking up and moving their operations abroad. Another one, raising wages and improving benefit packages to attract new domestic workers and to retain current staff. That means one thing and one thing alone. I don't think there's anything wrong with people making more money, but you have to be willing to pay for the consequences of that action, and that will be even higher prices at the supermarket. The government has created this crisis, and now they're going to try to fix it with more money that's printed out of thin air. All right, I heard about another stimulus check coming. How in the world is it that our government has not learned as of yet that the reason for a lot of the inflation that we are now facing is because they spent trillions of dollars that were created out of nothing and made the prices of things go up? Because the more money in the system chasing the same or lesser amount of goods, the more that those goods are going to cost nominally. The problem is that your wages don't keep up. All right, ladies and gentlemen, another thing that I heard, that the government is thinking about passing a bill or something like that to send every American a $100 card, gift card, every month so that they can pay for gasoline. Well, they created the problem to begin with, and now they're going to print even more money so that the problem can exacerbate to an even bigger problem. What are you going to do then, ladies and gentlemen? There's only so much money that you can create before the system implodes. I'm surprised that the system has not imploded yet, but eventually it will, and that is why you have to be prepared for anything. Be prepared out as far as you can possibly be prepared, because you are going to need your preps. And I'll finish it off with this, ladies and gentlemen. I'm going to go ahead and leave a link to all of these articles and websites that I visited for this video. So if you want to revisit it, you can go ahead and revisit it. But here it says, another problem is seed costs. To plant wheat, a farmer needs, on average in the U.S., a large amount of wheat seed per acre. But higher wheat prices mean the seed for planting is more costly, obviously, right? As each input into a crop rises its price, seed, fertilizers, herbicide, pesticides, fuel, labor, etc., the commodity price must go higher to allow the farmer to plant without a financial loss. Exactly what I was talking about right in the beginning. Right now, the cost of inputs is probably too high for most farmers, despite higher commodity prices. So even though the commodity prices, and that's incredible to even think about, because wheat has gone up in price incredibly. If you take a look at the chart, it's like a hockey stick up. So even with the price of wheat going up that high, they still cannot afford the input price, because they're still going to make less than what wheat is going for right now, even though it's at an all-time high right now. This will cause wheat prices and food prices to rise eventually, providing a commodity price for wheat that is higher than the input cost. But before that happens, supply will fall dramatically, and prices at the grocery store for wheat foods will jump much higher. Exactly what I said in the beginning, ladies and gentlemen. All right, we are going to have a shortage. How long will that a real shortage? How long will it last? I'm not sure if it'll last one season or two. But there's going to be a lot of farmers that cannot afford to plant. Even at these high commodity prices, they will not be able to afford to plant, because the input cost for their crop is more than what they would receive in return after their harvest. So how long will that last? Will that only last one season? Will it last 2 seasons? I don't know. Eventually, there will be a high enough price on commodities where farmers are like, yeah, I can afford to plant this year because the input cost is only 80% of what the commodity price is. So I'll be able to make a 20% profit at the end of the harvest if they contract it, right? But how long will that take? Get ready for even higher food prices. That is what's coming down the line. You should be prepared for everything. But food, ladies and gentlemen, we can't live without. Maybe for a little bit. For guys like me, a little longer than the average person. But you know what I mean. Having said that, I hope you got something out of this. Remember to be good to each other. When good people do good things happen. Remember to reach one, teach one, and repeat. If we all did this, the world would be a better place. You know that it will be a better place. Many blessings to all of you and your families. I'm Alaska Prepper. I'm out.